If for some reason you were super tired and fell asleep for 24 hours since we last talked, you didn't miss jack. Is it time to worry? Who are the targets still for the Cardinals? And is what they have even close to enough? Alex, Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yeah. We don't want to talk about your bracket already. Is that what
Alex, Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals. Steve Keim is my bracket history. Let's just put it that way. Follow him at Bob Brack. Follow me at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day. Free and available on all platforms. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Please comment, like, whatever. All interactions, good interaction. Whether you agree, disagree, we're here for it here on Locked On Cardinals. So, as I mentioned in the cold open that we call it in the biz, Cardinals haven't done jack aside from re-signing Andy Lee and somebody who I forget.
Long snapper Aaron Brewer.
Here's the thing. We're going to talk about a couple things here. There's still a couple big names out there via trade and free agency. There are a lot of players that are no longer available, namely one big name wide receiver who's probably would have cost more than the Cardinals wanted to spend on a wide receiver two alongside DeAndre Hopkins, but he landed somewhere in division. We'll talk about it. And are you worried yet? We're 96 hours in. Is this much ado about nothing? Is this you're jumping to conclusions too early? Or is this more of the same hashtag DOI definition of insanity in the Arizona Cardinals? The Arizona Cardinals have signed one player who was not an Arizona Cardinal last year, and Jeff Gladney. Okay, 25 years old, at a TCU, was cut by the Vikings. That's it. What we've seen so far, the Jacksonville Jaguars have spent $2.6 billion on free agents. Big names have landed elsewhere, namely Von Miller he's going to be printing money until he's 50, seemingly, signing with Buffalo. Chandler Jones with the Raiders. And what we saw yesterday, midday, was just another kind of needle into the heart, was Allen Robinson signing a 3-year deal with the Los Angeles Rams to say in division, couple him with Cooper Kupp. Not sure what they're going to do with Robert Woods and OBJ, but somehow they still have money to sign one, if not both of those guys. Bo, right now, what are your thoughts on 2 out of the 4 days available? The Cardinals pretty much made 0 impact moves. I mean, Andy Lee's an impact move, okay, but special teams are only important when you have a good offense and defense.
The Arizona Cardinals were able to bring back 21 touchdowns. That's key, right? James Conner, Zach Ertz, they get back into the fold. 18 of those belong to James Conner. They get, now 3 of their big special teamers back. Dennis Gardeck, he signs the 3-year, $12 million deal. It's mostly been retention. But that was what was key with this team that won 11 games. What the Arizona Cardinals, what their plan is starting to materialize and make sense is they want to get back to the team that started 7-0, 10-2. They want to get back to that team. And that team was a wagon in the red zone. They were efficient. They had DeAndre Hopkins and J.J. Watt playing at a high level on both sides of the football, and they expect them to return to the lineup and do the same thing in 2022. And then they've got the guys, the key additions, and Ertz and Connor that they added along the way. Now it's up to Steve Keim to continue to survey this market, and I know that's all he's done so far outside of Jeff Gladney, but he still has an opportunity. There are still moves to be made to improve this football team. When you look at where the Arizona Cardinals, as far as how many losses they've lost, according to the advanced metrics, they haven't lost any. They're just the status quo. They haven't improved, but they haven't lost anything. And the Arizona Cardinals have an opportunity in some key spots to improve their roster, including like a Fletcher Cox addition or another guy that I know you and I agree on that they should be aggressive in trying to make a move for. It's just, I'm not hitting panic mode on this just yet. I think that they have a plan in place. I hate the sitting on their hands part. I do. I'm a very impatient person. I really am. I would love to see the Arizona Cardinals make move after move, but at the same time, making the wrong move doesn't make sense. But I want to ask you something real quick. Did you have Von Miller signing that type of deal going into this offseason?
No, of course not.
That's an absurd amount of money.
Yeah, I'm assuming it's like a Taysom Hill deal, kind of, where it's really a 3-year deal when it's broken down. But what is it, $53 million in guarantees, not guaranteed. Todd Gurley, it's probably half of that, if maybe 2/3 of that. But no, I did not.
And then, look, I mean, the Rams signing Allen Robinson, it's like a lot of people see, especially deals like that, as a glass half full thing. It's like what you think of the Patriots with McVay now in LA. It's like, hey, it's the perfect situation for him to kind of have a career resurgence. It happened with Odell Beckham Jr. It's happened with several guys before. But he is a guy that had red flags, no doubt about it. He struggled mightily in Chicago. Didn't he just have about 500 yards receiving last year? But look, you've got an all-world wide receiver. You had the guy who had the triple crown wide receiver as far as receivers go in Cooper Kupp. If he can complement Cooper, then I think they've got a pretty good guy there in Allen Robinson. But let's remind people. I don't know if they know this just yet. Just the cap doesn't exist. When you say there's no cap money, hey, the cap doesn't exist. When you say the team doesn't have any cap money, it doesn't matter. Yeah. It doesn't matter. They can still sign people. That's why it's also frustrating. It's like, what are they waiting for? But I think they're maybe, the insiders in the NFL knew maybe guys like Fletcher Cox were going to become available. Maybe some other guys were going to be available, and they're waiting to pounce. Hopefully, you hope.
If you're standing still, you're falling behind. And that's the issue that I'm having now. You know what? I understand it's 96 hours from player tampering and the actual start of free agency. Okay, I completely understand that. And the Cardinals have taken a step backwards in the respect of losing their pass rush. Okay? I know J.J. Watt's still there. I know Marcus Golden still. Like, I get it. I know who's on the roster. Okay? Mm-hmm. But you lose Chandler Jones, you lose somebody that opposing teams have had to scheme for the last 7 years that he was an Arizona Cardinal, or 6 years, whatever it was. Okay? You have taken a step backward in a very important situation, and there's no plan to fill it, it seems, at this point.
Okay? Are you talking about the Rams, or are you talking about the Cardinals? Because the Rams lost Von Miller.
Okay.
I mean, they
would you rather be the Rams or the Cardinals right now?
They lost Sebastian Joseph Day as well. Who had, outside of Aaron Donald, the most negative plays per game last season. That's going to be a big loss for them. He goes to the Chargers. I think with the Arizona Cardinals, like I know that as of day 2 officially of the new league year, it looks bleak, but they got 6 months before they got to play games. I mean, the Rams roster, what the Arizona Cardinals needs to continue to do is improve their roster. First step was retaining guys. Next step is, observing the market and then figuring out what's the best option for them to add on. And you look at where they need to fix. It was the rush defense, and there's some guys available. And then the pass rush continues to be a deep spot. Like, there's still some big time available players that they can boost. Like, how many players do they need to boost the pass rush? How many?
2 and somebody in the draft.
Maybe 1, right?
If Chandler Jones were still on the roster, like, you can't rely on J.J. Watt. Okay? It's like, you know what? They have J.J. Watt, so they'll be fine. They just need to add an ancillary piece. J.J. Watt needs to be a bonus. Okay? He needs to be schemed for on the right side of the offensive line, but he needs to be an ancillary piece. And it needs to be as if J.J. Watt is not on the roster, in my opinion. Okay? And again, very early, sure. And other teams are making huge moves like they didn't win the Super Bowl last year, and one team did win the damn Super Bowl last year who's making moves already. This just feels like we felt this before. And I think that's kind of what it's more worrisome now, because we feel this a lot more than other teams, it seems.
A red flag wide receiver.
Why is he a red flag? He had no quarterback.
He quit on his team.
So would most diva wide receivers on the outside with that system.
But that's a red flag, right?
Okay.
It doesn't make, like, there's been more talent that's exited LA since and look, it was a Super Bowl team that's come in. Like, I'm not going to say, repeat, they got Allen Robinson. Like, he's not the receiver any longer. He's a good player. Good compliment.
Yeah. I just don't. And the Cardinals sent somebody else who had potentially other red flags off the field. So I don't know what the difference would be with red flag or not red flag. The Cardinals are not in a position to pick and choose what talent they bring in at this point. If they want to stay on par, and again, I'm not diminishing what happened with Jeff Gladney, who they signed, and we're going to stick to football. I'm not comparing the two by any stretch. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying that the Cardinals looking at Allen Robinson and saying, oh, he was a problem with the Bears. That is a terrible reason not to sign him if they were thinking about signing him. Now, you know what?
How much money he got?
It was 3 years. It was less. Yes, it was a lot of money.
$46 million.
And the New Orleans Saints were $76 million over the salary cap when the season ended 2021. They're now $30 million under it in 6 weeks. Okay? So, as you mentioned with the salary cap, it's a lot. It can be moved around. I want to pivot here. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about Danielle Hunter and Fletcher Cox in the final segment, okay? Next segment, I'm going to ask Bo a question. We haven't talked about this before the podcast. I wanted to, and I forgot. I'm going to ask you at the top. BetOnline.ag, okay? Death, taxes, and me getting the first game of the NCAA tournament wrong. Every year. But if you're all in with the NCAA tournament, we had a monster day yesterday. Today, day 2 of round 1. It's that time of year. BetOnline.net's got you covered. The number one source for all your sports betting needs and info, remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline's your continued source for all your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. Second segment. This is going to be a doozy because I don't think we've ever talked about this in full segment form. We're going to do it here in just a minute. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day. Make sure to check out the Locked On NFL channel. We have great hosts from across the Locked On NFL platform. Bo does his on Mondays. We have our fearless leader, Russ Jackson, and Luke Braun on Tuesdays. And then Thursdays, Tyler Rowland and myself, Tyler from TikTok Titans. It's just check it out for the national sports. You can check it on YouTube and free and available on all platforms, just like where you find Locked On Cardinals. Is it because it's the Cardinals that players don't want to sign here? I've put a lot of blame on Steve Keim and Michael Bidwell for extending Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim for everything. I put a lot of blame, asked a lot of questions, and is it as simple as players don't want to play here and it doesn't have to do with the money?
Who have they swung and missed on?
We don't know who they talk to all the time. But we don't know who they've made offers to.
Who do they need to go? Who did they have to go out there? Who is the missing piece that would say, thanks, but no thanks, because you've got this stigma around you? Who are we missing out on? Who was that guy that I should be upset about? Because I don't know who that is.
Well, there's a lot of free agents. There's a lot of calls being made that aren't like, oh, the Cardinals called about Allen Robinson or reached out to Allen Robinson's agent. Not all that stuff's reported.
Okay.
So there could be bountiful names of people that the Cardinals reach out. They're like, no, I'm good. For the amount of vitriol that's been around the NFL from former.
A lot of times you're just changing the jersey on these guys. Like free agency is not like free agency doesn't make that big of an impact. Like a lot of these guys, like there was one free agency where it didn't produce one Pro Bowler. The entire offseason, there wasn't one guy on the market that got to a Pro Bowl, because if teams are smart, if they're savvy, they keep their talent in-house. I'm not saying that there aren't impact makers out there. I mean, absolutely. But I just don't know, like, why is it the same people that are panicking now are the same people that panic after a 3-and-out, like, this offense can't do anything. It's like it was one series. It doesn't make the entire game. Like, there's no reason to hit the panic button just yet, because this offseason continues to develop. Like yesterday we saw a bunch of big names like Za'Darius Smith just got back onto the free agent market after we thought he was headed back to Baltimore. The Hunter conversation we're going to have, he could be gotten via trade. Fletcher Cox was going to be released by the Philadelphia Eagles. Like, there are guys that are hitting the market, and it's already a deep pass rush group. Like, the Arizona Cardinals, that's a big need of theirs. Corners, there's still big time name corners out there. there's still guys on the as far as wide receivers that can make an impact and make this offense look a little bit better than it did as we record this.
Yeah. And again, I'm not saying I'm just posing a question. It wasn't rhetorical.
Yeah,
It wasn't anything like that.
I don't buy into that. I think
there
is
like this, but there are spurned players that were here, and it's not a one-way street. Like, Tyrann Mathieu and what Chandler Jones said wasn't glowing about the Cardinals. What Jordan Phillips said wasn't glowing about the Cardinals when he signed with the Bills. It's when he re-signed with the Bills. It seems like
what's the Jordan Phillips frustrated with the Cardinals for? He's the one who couldn't get on the field.
Right. And Steve Keim gave him probably double the amount of money that he was worth guaranteed. Yeah. So we don't necessarily have to dive into it's just I'm thinking about it because it's a different angle. Because if you want to be good at anything, you have to be able to argue the opposing side. I can argue the opposing side of wanting to keep Steve Keim as a head coach, wanting to keep Cliff Kingsbury as a GM, wanting to keep Cliff Kingsbury as the head coach, wanting to trade Kyler Murray. I can argue both sides. I think the opposite of what I say is wrong, but I can argue both sides. It just brings a question is it us? Is it the Cardinals? Is it the jersey? Is it the uniform? Is it the history? Is it Michael Bidwell that is keeping people from being even considering the Cardinals, aside from the Terrell Suggs 1 year, $7 million, we'll cut you in the middle of the regular season, go win a Super Bowl somewhere else. Is that what the Cardinals are to players that are 33, 32, 33 that are on the free agent market right now? Casey Hayward signed elsewhere. We're slowly starting to see these names that we're looking at on this wish list go elsewhere. And I'm wondering if it has more to do with just the roster right now is currently constructed.
No. This is an appealing roster for guys who are out there on the market. This is the second consecutive offseason where Hayward is gone elsewhere. Maybe the Cardinals just don't like him. Maybe they don't think he's a fit. Maybe Vance Joseph doesn't think how he would fit into his defensive secondary. And the wish lists vary. Your wish list, my wish list, Steve Keim's, Cliff Kingsbury's, Michael Bidwell's, they all vary. Just because there's good players out there, it doesn't mean that the Arizona Cardinals are immediately going to go and say, hey, let's strike a deal here. I think that, look at J.J. Watt. J.J. Watt decided, he had several options, and he chose the Arizona Cardinals. He was paid handsomely, but he certainly had options. It wasn't like he was sitting there waiting for the phone to ring. His agent was very busy during his free agent time, which was short. I don't think that there's an issue as far as what's not appealing about the Arizona Cardinals. They're just like any other organization in the NFL where they have the business side has been ugly. Tyrann Mathieu, he's got his issues with the Cardinals. But you could say that about the 31 other GMs in organizations in this league. There's some player that has an issue with a team.
For sure. Clancy and Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals. Danielle Hunter is your worth trading a second-round pick for. Is Fletcher Cox worth going after being released, even though there's still some words around him potentially coming back to Philly at a much lower rate before they cut him before his signing bonus day. Clancy and Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals. Built Bar. It's this time of year. My New Year's resolutions are gone. We're 10 weeks out. Stop doing my sit-ups and push-ups. I think Bo's still on the horse, but Built Bar makes it a little bit easier for you if you are still on that horse, to stay away from candy bars, because Built Bars are just better. Have you tried the Puffs? They're marshmallow infused or protein infused marshmallow bars. They're covered in chocolate, 17 grams of protein, 4 grams of sugar, 5 grams of sugar. It's what are you doing here? They're the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy marshmallow. They're not just a protein bar. They're a treat, and they're also not a candy bar, so everybody wins. Go to Built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low calorie, high fiber, low carb. That's pretty much all the buzzwords you want. They usually have around 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar that has 240 calories and 30 grams of sugar or something. Built Bar wins. Go to Built.com. Use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your first order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, final segment here, Locked On Cardinals. Follow him at Bo Brack. Follow me at Clancy's Corner. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. We're doing some fun stuff here. I'm not jumping to conclusions. Okay. I'm not being off the rails irrational. I'm acknowledging what's happening, comma, and what's not, comma, and deducing what I think should and will happen next. And this 100% has to do with Steve Keim's history. 100%.
Explain that more.
Steve Keim, like, he's top heavy in how he conducts things, in how he builds rosters, in how he makes splashes. That's what he does. Last year was one of the deepest rosters at skill positions we've seen, and still, look what happened. Okay, couple players get injured. Obviously, DeAndre Hopkins down the stretch. I don't put enough weight in that as I should. I know that. I know that. And they had a good enough roster to finish better than they did. So that's more what I was looking at. The DeAndre Hopkins trade, one of the best ever, was probably Michael Bidwell and not Steve Keim. Steve Keim gets credit. That was an owner-to-owner trade, and Steve Keim gets credit. The James Conner signing last year was a great signing. It was a little bit, there was more gray area around that because we hadn't seen him perform as well as of late, so that was a home run. Okay, so I'm not saying that nothing good has come out of Steve Keim and his free agent search. But what we've seen from other teams and the free agents that are available now and his inability to draft effectively, that's making me wonder why they aren't going after more free agents, why they aren't looking more for trade partners here, for impact makers, because we all know when the draft comes around, definition of insanity. And maybe it'll change this year. We don't know. But that's why I'm a little hesitant to be like, oh, you know what? There's a lot of time left.
There is a lot of time left.
And I know that.
I'm glad that you don't run the organization. I mean, I don't know how many coaches we'd be on right now. I mean, as far as just making a move to make a move, you know,
we got a different head coach.
What's that?
We were on a different head coach and a different GM before the end of the 2018 season.
For sure. I just think that, look, we're early in the off season, and there's still a lot of big dominoes out there to fall. And, you know, there have been some big moves that have improved some rosters early on and good for those teams. But I think that the biggest key for the Cardinals was to retain these guys, and they have. And now they got to go out there, and they do have to find that depth. They absolutely do. They have to be able to set themselves up, because the next step in this thing is to win in games and advance in the postseason, not to go out and no show in the wild card weekend, and also not fall apart down the stretch. So they have to build their roster to avoid that. Like, they know where their downfall was. So now they have to figure out how to remedy that, and that's going to be key. I understand why people would be skeptical. I'm skeptical myself, but at the same time, I don't doubt that there's enough talent available. And I don't doubt that Steve Keim can get at the negotiating table and figure out a deal to bring in talent to this roster. But yeah, it's going to come down to finding those guys, you know, checking underneath the correct rocks and finding the right, you know, players to add to this team, and spending that money wisely, what they have cap wise, and then making the right moves draft wise. Like that's going to be key. There's still a ton of opportunity out there. I'm right there with you as far as with Keim, but I'm not hitting the panic button at all, because I do think that they could revamp this pass rush and this defense, this front seven. They can add to the defensive secondary, because I think there's, like, you got to keep in mind, like, the pieces are in place. Like, the top heaviness remains. Like, this is a pretty star-studded roster still. Kyler Murray, DeAndre Hopkins, James Conner, Zach Ertz, Rodney Hudson, and DJ Humphries is okay on the offensive line. Rodney Hudson's a star on the offensive line. You know, you got some continuity coming back there on the defensive side. You know, you got Marcus Golden on the pass rush, and you've got your linebackers who need to develop, but Isaiah Simmons can be there. And in your secondary, you've got Byron Murphy Jr., and you've got your two solid safeties. Like, if you add anything to this, you know, Stephon Gilmore, Mike Pierce, it looks a lot better. It's not like this is just a complete crap box roster.
No, agreed. But I think we both can be right here. I think that there needs to be more urgency, and the roster is good, fine as is, but still needs some severe improvements. And if you have, 2 or 3 spots, if you add a couple players, then obviously things can change seemingly overnight. Really quick, we got to get out of here. 2 minutes. Yes or no? Should the Cardinals look into trading for Danielle Hunter?
Yes. Second round pick, do it. Pull the trigger on that. You talk about Steve Keim's resume, where his strength is pulling off deals, trading, the way you miss in the second round is you trade him for a proven commodity, and Danielle Hunter would get you right back to a Chandler Jones caliber pass rusher that you would put immediately into this defense with J.J. Watt, with the junkyard dog, Marcus Golden, with those linebackers. Danielle Hunter, he only played in 7 games. And he had 6 sacks last year. I mean, he's an absolute just problem. And I think the Arizona Cardinals would be a great spot. And Luke Braun pointed out a way that they could easily restructure his bonus money, and it wouldn't be that rough. Yeah,
what is it, like $5 million a year or something? Yeah. Luke's really good about that stuff. Check him out. If you want any sort of Vikings news, check out Luke Braun on Locked On Vikings. I agree. I mean, I feel like it's a guy in the middle that you can trust, and a guy in the middle that's top tier. And it won't keep you from having to sign it won't keep you from signing other players. Yeah. I mean, I think it would just be another one. You bring in a corner, you call it a day, and then you draft well. Like, we're not far away from seeing the Cardinals improve their roster, but we haven't taken that step yet. We haven't seen that step yet to where it's like, you know what, they're a better roster this year than they were last year. We haven't seen that yet. It's still very early. We'll keep our finger on the pulse. Alex Clancy Bo Brack, follow him at Bo Brack. Follow me at Clancy's Corner. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy, former NFL quarterback Eric Crocker, bring the NFL draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available on all platforms. Alex Clancy, Bo Brack, Locked On Cardinals. We'll talk to you tomorrow.